Hey everybody, welcome back to the Environmental Podcast. We are coming at you live or pre-recorded actually from my childhood bedroom.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's very cozy. We have these plush sheep just kind of staring us down. Various sizes of the same type, of the same one for some reason.
Yeah, so we're home for a break and we are just going to be recording this episode. Really exciting.
Yeah, we have a reading week from school, so a break from ignoring my homework.
Yeah, so you can just let yourself, you're not even ignoring anymore.
Yeah, I can really just let myself go.
Yeah. So, fun times. How's your week been, Aaron? Any highlights, lowlights?
Well, I really liked, last week we recorded the Oscars episode.
Yes.
And I really liked seeing since the Oscars, there was such a positive reaction to Parasite winning.
Yes.
Which is the same one we had, and also a very widespread bewildered reaction to Eminem performing, which is the same one that we had.
Yes.
But now that we figured out it was because he wasn't present for his original
Oscar win
for Lose Yourself 17 years ago. So it only makes sense.
Yeah, only makes sense to come back 17 years later. We were chatting about kind of some possible snubs at the Oscars since then and our predictions even for next year. So, if anyone is into film and watched the Spirit Awards, Indie Spirit Awards, you might have seen Adam Sandler's speech.
I really liked Adam Sandler's speech. It was very funny. Adam Sandler really has his moments.
Yes.
But he was so self-aware in this speech about the kind of movies that he's been making over the last decade or so.
Yeah.
I found it hilarious. He was kind of making fun of the paychecks that he's picked up.
Yep.
And making fun of the other nominees for losing to Adam Sandler.
Yeah, he won for Best Actor.
Yeah, for Uncut Gems. So I definitely recommend you watch that speech and that movie. And the directors for that movie, Josh and Benny Safdie, also won Best Directors at the Indie Spirit Awards. And that speech was also hilarious. They gave it pretty much overlapping, so you couldn't understand what either of them were saying. But I guess it let them thank double the amount of people as usual.
Yeah.
The Indie Spirit Awards seems cool. It seems like a more accurate reflection of actual movie quality than the Oscars, probably because there's less money involved and there's less lobbying, and it's less high profile. So
they're more entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
Like the Oscars were entertaining, but I mean these were just from the clips I've seen.
Well, it seems less corporate. Maybe next year we could review that one instead.
Yeah, we'll see.
But today we are moving away from the modern entertainment and we're getting into classical entertainment, or should I say kind of getting back to it.
Yeah.
And we are talking about a Greek myth called the 5 Ages of Mankind.
Yes.
Or the 5 Ages of Man. Or the 5 Races of Man. It has multiple names.
Yes, it was composed nearly 3,000 years ago, so that's why there's so many names.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was composed... Do you want to just jump right into it?
Just jump right into it.
Cool. So it was written by a Greek poet who was contemporaneous with Homer.
You stole my word.
Stole your word. And his name was...
Hesiod.
And he was... I didn't know about him until we came across this myth.
There's a lot of ancient Greek epic poets and scholars and historians and stuff that we never really know about, because I guess just through the process of time, it's only the most famous ones who kind of stick around, really. Yeah. Like, everyone knows Homer because he wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad, or they're credited to him anyway.
Yep.
This person was around the same time. Hesiod was apparently one of the first economists, or possibly the first ever economist.
Yeah.
And also, I guess he was the first writer in the Western tradition, as it says online, to kind of consider his role as the author when he's writing down his things. So a more subjective approach rather than just kind of being an archivalist of myths and stories.
Yeah, so he was like putting his own thoughts and perspectives into his writing.
Yeah. Whereas
a lot of the other ones were either saying, oh, the gods are speaking through me, or just they're writing down these oral traditions. Yeah.
Hesiod is best known for his works and Days and the Theogony.
Yep.
And they're kind of mythological inspired, and also kind of Works and Days anyway, I was reading, is his motivation for writing it was kind of trying to get his lazy, good-for-nothing brother to become a hardworking man. So that's why a lot of the stories have morals like that.
Cool. And a few other things about him that I found interesting was that he wasn't just an academic. He was like really well known for his spreading of agricultural practices.
Ooh.
Yeah, so he invented, I don't know exactly what, probably some irrigation systems and things, and he like disseminated this information to the less privileged farmers and things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
he's cool. He did a lot in his life. Yeah.
For sure. So the work we're reading, The 5 Ages of Man, do you want to talk about why we chose this one to talk about?
Yeah, so we were just kind of going through the Greek myths, and
I got a library book out, and it's called The Anthology of Classical Myth.
Yeah.
So it seems it's very, very dense.
Yeah, so we have a lot of myths. Yeah. Everything from Zeus to
Hesiod.
Hesiod, yeah. And so we got to this one, and it seemed like it could have been written yesterday.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. As soon as I read it, you instantly drew a lot of conclusions or a lot of connections to other classical religious texts.
Yeah, I mean it's a story which when we'll read it out, people will hear is nothing new to us, really.
No.
It's an old story, and what I like learning about is stories that seem to have manifested in completely isolated cultures, because that kind of implies that it's something
innate in humans.
Innate and more true and psychological and, transcends kind of geographic or cultural boundaries, which this story definitely does, because it's all over the place. But Hesiod's version, which we're about to read, he puts his own spin on it. And it's exciting.
Yeah, and it's something it's interesting to look back on stories this old and kind of be able to take it into the modern era, use it as kind of inspiration, kind of hope. But we'll get into that probably afterwards.
For sure, because this is a new series. And we're just going to be going through some classic myths.
Yes.
We'll try and distribute it among different cultures. Just personally, I've been getting really into the classical world and learning about antiquity. I like the aesthetics of the ancient Mediterranean, which is why we did the Wonders of the World episode a few weeks ago.
Yep.
It's really cool. I kind of have a thing for classic works right now. Reading some, being immersed in it. What do you think?
No, I'm the same. I'm really interested right now in learning in just global cultures because I haven't traveled too much yet.
Yeah, I guess it's a way of me traveling without traveling, basically. Yeah. I think that's
Pretty
probably
much
why I'm most into it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Even traveling through time, because it's the most interesting way.
Yeah, so the way we're going to do this is the 5 Ages of Mankind is written in 5 stanzas, because Hesiod was very good like that. And we're just going to be reading off one stanza at a time and then kind of going over it.
Yes.
So I'll start us off. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, the 5 Ages. Golden was the first race of articulate folk, created by the immortals who live on Olympus. They actually lived when Kronos was king of the sky, and they lived like gods, not a care in their hearts, nothing to do with hard work or grief, and miserable old age didn't exist for them. From fingers to toes they never grew old, and the good times rolled. And when they died, it was like sleep just raveled them up. They had everything good. The land bore them fruit all on its own, and plenty of it too. Cheerful folk, they did their work peaceably and in prosperity, with plenty of flocks, and they were dear to the gods. And sure, when earth covered over that generation, they turned into holy spirits, powers above ground, invisible wardens for the whole human race. They roam all over the land, shrouded in mist, tending to justice, repaying criminal acts, and dispensing wealth. This is their royal honor.
So that is the first stanza. And when I read it, I just instantly made connections to basically every religion I know about, or every, even just culture, because it is a reflection on the past, the beginning, and it's just depicting it as all good.
Yeah, everything was good. The people were good. The fruit was plenty. Everyone was cheerful. Peace, prosperity.
Close to the gods.
Yeah, that's a key thing that we're going to be pointing out through all these stanzas. It says, with plenty of flocks, and they were dear to the gods. So this is obviously a very pious time, ancient Greece. Everyone, your worth as a person was kind of about how God-fearing you were. And obviously their gods were the Greek gods. So you've got Zeus, and he mentions here the Titans, so Kronos, which came before the big Olympic gods. So it's basically implying this was the very beginning of articulate folk. He doesn't say humans, but articulate folk. old age didn't exist for them, so they essentially had no problems.
Yep.
And as such, they lived very, very well. And also, when it describes their death, this is what I found most interesting about this. It says, when earth covered over that generation, so when they died, they turned into holy spirits, powers above ground, invisible wardens for the whole human race, who roam all over the land, tending to justice, repaying criminal acts, and dispensing wealth. This is their royal honor. So it's kind of like they lived so well, and they caused no problems, and they were God-fearing, so they were rewarded in death by being these kind of phantoms who enact a kind of cosmic justice over the world, so I can just imagine people maybe at this time seeing some kind of we call it karma.
Yeah.
Someone getting their dues and them saying, oh, well, that's the work of the old people.
Yeah, attributing it to them.
The old spirits.
Yeah, so this kind of seems like it was the foundation of, if I see it reflected in even modern culture. You look back in the past, and this was the ideals were set.
Yeah.
And I feel like we kind of judge ourselves against Eden or the.
I mean, we do definitely on this podcast.
Yeah.
We do a lot of like romanticizing about ancient history.
Yeah.
About how well things were, and degrowth kind of implies that we are returning to something.
Yes. No, I was getting at like the justice part, like how these folks were the ones enacting justice and like kind of ruling the earth. So it's like, even if they're not real spirits, like I feel like we kind of look at the past and we see like they kind of are the ones that set up our systems of justice and our systems for moral thinking.
Oh, so you're saying it's essentially metaphorical?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's probably a better reading of it. They probably weren't as superstitious as I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's a good reading of it. I like that.
Yeah.
So we're basically saying that our ancestors are tending to justice, repaying criminal acts, dispensing wealth through their lasting impact in the judicial and ethical code.
Yeah.
Well said.
Because there was a turning point when it was like people started writing out rules and trying to order society more, and I feel that's kind of maybe what these guys did, or like that's what our ancestors did.
So you're saying this was, well, you mentioned it wasn't quite 3,000 years ago. It was about 2,600 years ago.
Yeah.
Even then, he was romanticizing about the
golden age,
ancient past, the golden age.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying that the Bible also has something like that, which is Genesis.
Yeah.
And Eden, and how things were really good, and a lot of other cultures do as well. And then we'll see where this one goes. So shall we get straight into
we should get into that before we...
Okay.
Yeah.
Later, the Olympians made a second generation, silver this time, not nearly so fine as the first, not at all like the gold in either body or mind. A child would be reared at his mother's side 100 years, just a big baby playing at home. And when they finally did grow up and come of age, they didn't live very long, and in pain at that, because of their lack of wits. They just could not stop hurting each other, and could not bring themselves to serve the immortals, nor sacrifice at their altars the way men ought to, wherever and whenever. So Zeus, Cronos' son, got angry and did away with them, because they weren't giving the blessed gods their honors.
So that's
the second race.
Yes, and very relevant, I find.
It was quite different from the first. He emphasizes that they were nothing like the golden people.
This is kind of the fall of humans.
Yeah.
What was that you were saying? Like good times make bad people or something.
Yeah, it's kind of an old saying. The quote says men, but that's just because quotes back then all said men.
Yeah.
Which is why this story is called The 5 Ages of Man as well.
Yeah.
But we can change it to people, and it's strong people make good times. Good times make weak people make bad times, and bad times make strong people. So it's kind of a cycle like that.
Yeah.
And that's something I see in real life, because I think we're in a very good time right now, and that's also why we're quite weak.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean necessarily physically, it just means kind of our competency, because we don't have to do much. We don't have to catch our own food or whatever. And this is kind of a cycle in this story, because as we'll see, it's not just a straight line downward. So yeah, it would basically say the golden age was a good time and it had good people, but then because
made this race of babies
who
are just really weak.
Yeah. I that's what I liked about this stanza, was when he said, a child would be reared at his mother's side 100 years, just a big baby playing at home, because that reminds me so much of people today, including myself. And that's not a judgment, including myself. I mean, we're all just kind of emotionally and intellectually, I guess, much younger than our age a lot of the time.
Yeah, people our age in the past would have like a family of 3 kids or something. It's just like they had to be a lot more competent. They've probably been working.
Yeah, we're just playing video games and speaking into our microphones.
Yeah.
Talking to ourselves. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I can't really help myself from just pointing out words and saying, oh, that's interesting, and I like that phrasing. But we should mention this is like a 2,600-year-old translation, so the words are probably quite different from what Hesiod actually wrote, and they probably weren't exact translations from ancient Greek into modern-day English anyway.
Yeah.
We were talking about that because the first stanza says articulate folk, and later on we say articulate folk, and that kind of jumped out to us, and we're like, that probably just means humans or sentient beings or something like that.
Yeah, that was the only word that really jumped out at us as one that...
Well, I also don't know if he probably said a big baby playing at home.
Yeah, that sounds
But he could have. You don't know. It could have been a modern invention, or that could have been how they spoke back then. Notably here as well, so the first people were very dear to the gods, and as such it was bountiful fruit, and here it was they just could not stop hurting each other and could not bring themselves to serve the immortals or sacrifice at the altars.
Yeah.
And so Zeus got angry and did away with them, which is what it says. So they weren't very God-fearing. They couldn't stop from hurting themselves. I like the way this one's written. It's kind of like it speaks of the Silver Age people as just babies who don't really know what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Yeah.
It's not even a really kind of condemnatory tone, as we'll see later in the poem. It's kind of just describing badly behaved children.
Yeah, kind of more pity, just being like they had no relationship with anything outside themselves, and they didn't even really have any kind of self-awareness. Yeah. So
shall we move on?
Yeah, on to the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and when earth had covered over that generation, blessed underground mortals is what they are called, second in status, but still they have their honor, Father Zeus created a third generation of articulate folk. Bronze this time, not like the silver at all, made them out of ash trees, kind of monstrous and heavy, and all they cared about was fighting and war. They didn't eat any food at all. They had this kind of hard, untamable spirit, shapeless hulks, terrifically strong. Grapple hook hands grew out of their shoulders on thick stumps of arms. And they had bronze weapons, bronze houses, and their tools were bronze. No black iron back then. Finally, they killed each other off with their own hands and went down into the bone-chilling halls of Hades and left no names behind. Astounding as they were, Black Death took them anyway, and they left the sun's light.
Yeah.
So what jumps out of you about the Bronze Age people?
The violence and obtusity, maybe, if that's a word. They seem like a very obtuse people. Like they just would...
Very stubborn.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more deliberate this time.
Or
so it seems to me anyway. Whereas the Silver Age people were always fighting and hurting each other, but it was as if they couldn't help themselves, or they had no choice in it.
Like they were kids, just...
Yeah, this third people, they were big babies. This third people, it was... it seems more deliberate. It says all they cared about was fighting and war. So they did care about it. They were monstrous and heavy. And it says they had this kind of hard, untamable spirit, which sounds kind of biblical to me. Their hearts were hard.
Yeah.
Shapeless hulks, terrifically strong. I like that. This is also the first kind of vivid physical description we've gotten of these guys.
Yes, that's true.
Because I guess they were defined more by their physiques than anything else.
So that could have to do with like pride as well.
Also at the start of this, it says, and when earth had covered over that generation, meaning the Silver Age people, they were blessed underground mortals is what they're called, second in status, but still they have their honor. So it's kind of what we were saying about the second people. It's not ultra condemning them and saying, no, they still have their honor. They were just victims of this kind of overparenting, maybe. A child would be reared at his mother's side 100 years.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Whereas this one, there's no honor for the third people. They were just violent. Shapeless hulks.
So I feel like it's kind of saying, like, pride and violence are, like, kind of the worst. And then, well, I don't know. Because then the other one was more, like, incompetence. And
yeah. It's also about, I was reading up about this, and it said this was it's a common story of the time and the place, this kind of Middle Eastern antiquity, which was mapping the degradation of human society to different precious metals, which is why we have the Golden Age, and then the Silver Age, which is slightly less valuable, and then we go to Bronze, which the other ones just kind of mention silver and gold, but this one it says bronze weapons, bronze houses, and their tools were bronze. So and they were bronze people, so it emphasizes that, and that metal's known for being more practical, like a hardy combination of two metals, which I don't remember, maybe copper and something, I don't remember, but bronze is a combination metal. Yeah, I find that interesting. And then we'll see later on we get to iron. Shall we do that now?
Well, iron doesn't come next.
I mean, should we move on now?
Yeah, we should.
So after the bronze people were taken away by Black Death, we have... So Earth buried that generation too, and Zeus fashioned a fourth race to live off the land, juster and nobler, the divine race of heroes, also called demigods, the race before the present one. They all died fighting in the great wars, some at seven-gated Thebes, Cadmus' land, in the struggle for Oedipus's cattle, and some, crossing the water in ships, died at Troy for the sake of beautiful Helen. And when death's veil had covered them over, Zeus granted them a life apart from other men, settling them at the ends of the earth. And there they live, free from all care, in the Isles of the Blessed, by ocean's deep stream. Blessed heroes for whom the life-giving earth bears sweet fruit ripening 3 times a year.
Nice. So this is kind of where Hesiod comes into this traditional silver bronze.
Yeah, that Near Eastern...
Yeah.
The stories of other cultures, and even among Greece, it usually goes the 4 races: gold, silver, bronze, iron.
Yes.
Hesiod basically invents a 5th one, which is the Age of Heroes. Notice it's not about metals, it's the Age of Heroes. And he inserts it between bronze and iron.
Yes.
And this is kind of a throwback to the Golden Age.
Yeah. I think this is the most hopeful stanza, because when you look back on the story, normally just seems like it's going to keep degrading.
Yeah.
But I feel like, so we're living in the Iron Age at the end, and so we look back and we know at the beginning things were perfect.
Yeah.
But then we also look back at the 50s and are they had it so good.
Yes.
So I feel like it's kind of always looking back to the past, even though there were dark ages where things were really bad, obviously, and things right now are the best they've ever been. But we always look back on the past with respect and longing.
I think this is kind of the Remembrance Day of this poem. Hesiod and Greece in general had such a reverence for the sacking of Troy. It was such a huge war. Yeah. And this is why it's such a big thing, and why it's so mythologized. But it was a real war, and that's why Hesiod chose to kind of immortalize it, and immortalize those race of heroes who were just and noble. They were a divine race, and they were the most recent ones. So that's kind of, I think, the way we talk about and especially it says they all died fighting in the great wars. Well, we've had some pretty recent great wars, and I think most of us, we all kind of agree that that was a sort of race of heroes, or a generation of heroes anyway.
Yeah, they were all incredibly brave. And
so I think that's what Hesiod's doing here, and I think you're right that it's a more optimistic reading. I'm glad that he inserted that, because otherwise it would just be a straight line downward from Golden Age to degeneracy. But this race of heroes kind of implies that is not that kind of degradation is not fated. We can go against the grain, we can reverse that and move against it. Yes. Because they're kind of a highlight. Anything else? Again, he mentions how they die and they are kind of rewarded by the gods. Zeus granted them a life apart from other men, so it's similar to how the Golden Age people died. Yeah. Settling them at the ends of the earth, and that they live free from all care. Again, they have the sweet fruit ripening. Sounds kind of good.
So yeah, they're kind of set up as a pillar of hope and set as a goal or a target for us to aspire to.
A more attainable goal than the Golden Age, which was just that was the Golden Age. Everything was good then.
Yeah, and they were set as kind of spirits, but these guys were just set, it says at the edges of the earth, free from all care. So it's as if it's you could visit them if you want.
Yeah. My voice is kind of dying out. Do you want to read the last one?
Yeah, I can.
Read the 5th people. Cool. I don't know how authors do that thing where they read an opening chapter.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so we have far from the immortals, and Kronos is their king. For the father of gods and men has released him, and he still has among them the honor he deserves. Then the fifth generation, broad-browed Zeus, made still another race of articulate folk, to people the plentiful earth. I wish I had nothing to do with this fifth generation. Wish I had died before or been born after, because this is the Iron Age. Not a day goes by a man doesn't have some kind of trouble. Nights, too, just wearing him down. I mean, the gods send us terrible pain and vexation. Still, there'll be some good mixed in with this evil. And then Zeus will destroy this generation, too. Soon as they start being born gray around the temples, then fathers won't get along with their kids anymore. Not guests with hosts, nor partners with partners. And brothers won't be friends the way they used to be. Nobody will honor their parents when they get old, but they'll curse them and give them a hard time. Godless rascals, and never think about paying them back for all the trouble it was to raise them. They'll start taking justice into their own hands, sacking each other's cities, no respect at all for the man who keeps his oaths, the good man, the just man. No, they'll keep all their praise for the wrongdoer, the man who is violence incarnate. And shame and justice will lie in their hands. Some good-for-nothing will hurt a decent man, slander him, and swear an oath on top of it. Envy will be everybody's constant companion, with her foul mouth and hateful face, relishing evil. And then, up to the Olympus, from the wide-pathed earth, lovely apparitions wrapped in white veils, off to join the immortals. Abandoning humans, there goes shame and nemes, and horrible suffering will be left for mortal men, and no defense against evil.
Very uplifting passage there.
Mm-hmm.
Very happy.
No escape.
Yeah, some very powerful imagery there. This is where we see Hesiod and his difference from other authors of antiquity, because he's putting himself in it. He's saying, I wish I had nothing to do with the fifth generation. Speaking very much from opinion.
Yes.
Wish I had died before or been after, because this is the Iron Age. Not a day goes by a man doesn't have some kind of trouble. Every person, probably through history, thinks that their age is the Iron Age.
Yeah.
Because we always think the past has no troubles, whereas the future is just degeneracy.
Yeah.
Personified, manifested. But even so, even though he's talking about the present at the start, I wish I had nothing to do with the fifth generation. This is what happens. At the end, he's still making prophecy or prediction about how the fifth generation, how the fifth generation will turn out. Horrible suffering will be left for mortal men. Some good for nothing will hurt a decent man. You know, they'll keep all their praise for the wrongdoer, the man who is violence incarnate. I like that. Yes.
It seems very Revelations.
Yeah, very Revelations from the Bible, descriptions of the Antichrist, and even the lovely apparitions wrapped in white veils who will leave us. And that might be even referring to the people from the Golden Age and the Age of Heroes who were...
They're just like leaving Earth to fend for themselves. Yeah, I never thought about that.
Well, they were there to kind of enact justice, right?
Yeah, but then the people just got so disconnected from spirituality and morals. They were like, no, bye.
Yeah.
Going to Olympus.
That is an interesting reading, because it says, there they go, and therefore there is no defense against evil. So it's kind of like the only thing keeping us from our own evil is the spirits or the phantoms and the memories of
the past.
The people from the past, yeah.
Yeah, that's why history repeats itself, but then if you forget about it, then it will.
Yeah, what's interesting is that if you read this poem to anyone today, they'd say, oh yeah, we're in the Iron Age, definitely, things are terrible. But according to Hesiod, this Iron Age now has been going on for 2,600 years. Yeah, I think that my favorite part of it was saying, I wish I wasn't born in this decade. Because everyone says that.
Everyone says that. They're like, oh, I was meant to be born in the 70s.
We think it all the time.
Yeah, for sure. It's like,
that's why we started this podcast.
Pretty much. But I thought that was really funny. He's like a hipster from 2,600 years ago. Just being like, nah, I was born in the wrong millennia. I don't know what.
I think that's why we kind of chose this specific reading of it, because I think that's so awesome. It's also more hopeful, I guess, because it's like, okay, we're not really in... Things aren't really that bad. Even Hesiod thought it was so bad, and he lived in ancient Greece, and that's a time that we think was kind of cool. Very brutal, but we always... we like the... It seems so pastoral and nice to us.
They were more about morals. That's another reason we picked this, was because nowadays people don't sit around telling stories with like these massive morals or massive thinking points or talking points.
True.
They'll just tell a story about their like pet or something.
True.
Yeah.
And also, Hesiod, when he says he's in the Iron Age because people aren't fearing gods anymore, fathers don't get along with their sons anymore, guests don't get along with their hosts, partners don't get along with their partners, brothers won't be friends the way they used to be, nobody honors their parents, everyone's a godless rascal, basically.
Yeah.
So that's why he thinks he's in the Iron Age, the age of degeneracy. If we were to survey people about today, like why is today so bad, they would probably not say those things.
No, they would say we have no connection with nature, our work.
I don't think they'd say that.
No?
I don't think, of course, but I don't think they would say, I think, so Hesiod's basically saying interpersonal relations have broken down and we've lost our connection to God. That's why he thinks, and that's why we think as well.
Yes, exactly.
But I mean, if you ask most people, I don't think they'd say that. They would say kind of more worldly issues. They would say, these wars are raging, society, inequality, finances, corruption, climate change. It would be less of a spiritual breakdown, but they'd be talking about more of a practical one, a physical one.
Oh yeah, that's true. I don't think about like what people would think about the state of things. Because I feel like I know that it's because of the breakdown of relationships and loss of spirituality and disconnect from the physical world.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is I don't think many people will say what Hesiod says, where he says, there'll be no respect at all for the man who keeps his oath, the good man, the just man. No, they'll all keep their praise for the wrongdoer, the man who is violence incarnate, and shame and justice will lie in their hands. I don't think many people would say that if you ask them what's wrong with the world today. But that's, just to get personal, I'm kind of writing a fictional book about this, which is about how we today have misinterpreted sin as virtue and virtue as sin, and we put the wrong thing on the pedestal, and we kind of look down on the right
thing. Yeah.
And that's exactly what Hesiod's saying there. There's been a switch.
Yeah.
We have a society which values the unethical man, the unethical person rather, the violent man. People could maybe, if we read this today, I imagine there'd be a lot of reading it as like a capitalist critique. Yeah. Well, it just rewards violence, man. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of true, but to make that or to invoke that kind of system is kind of missing the point entirely, I think.
Yeah.
Which is it's a personal thing or an interpersonal thing. It's a spiritual thing. It's not about our systems which we exist in.
No, it's about
ourselves
and how we enable these systems to exist. Continue to exist. Cool.
I had something else I wanted to mention, which is, I just have it written down as artists/writers not knowing the significance of what they write, because that's something that really, it's a belief I hold anyway, which is that, because when we talk about authorial intent, it's like, well, let's say we're analyzing a book in English class in high school. Yeah. And someone makes this crazy reading. They say, well, I actually read this as about feminism or something. Yeah. And to everyone it seems kind of far-fetched. I always wonder, it's kind of a big question, it's like, does it matter if the author intended it to be about feminism, or can it just be someone's reading, and is that as legitimate?
I think so. Because I feel like when people write things or make any kind of art, they're like, it's not entirely conscious. It's just like they don't know why they're making it. Even if they have full consciousness of like, this is why I'm choosing this color and this. But there's something supernatural about creating art. Yeah, that's what it's a bit like extra, but
no, that's what I was trying to get at, because Stephen King says something similar about writing. Historically it's always been that. It's always been like, no, it's not you, the author. It's just you opening yourself up to the muses, and the best writers or the best creators are the ones who can get themselves out the way as much as possible. Yeah. So I love that idea of someone writing something, not being conscious of why it's good, but being like, this seems right. This seems like it means something. It seems like it has some kind of depth to it, even if I don't know exactly what that message is, what that metaphor is. And I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, and so I just think it's completely legitimate if somebody reads a book and sees it as a feminist critique or a post-colonial critique, because this was written 2,600 years ago, so it's no way it's commenting on capitalism, but like if you read it like that.
But I think I wanted to mention that because if this is a new thing that we're going to be doing, which is kind of analyzing classical myths and classical writings one might say, well, why are we doing classical myths and classical writings and not contemporary ones?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something about those things having survived for so long.
Yeah.
And therefore the texts have had a chance to kind of take on different meanings through time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have just a stack of interpretations to kind of that we can file through or combine.
Yeah.
So the text becomes more than the text, it becomes its whole aura and its 2,600-year-old history.
Yeah.
Which I like.
Yeah, because we could just look at a modern...
Also because these ones, even if it's not explicitly prophetic as this one kind of attempts to be,
Mm-hmm.
because they're so old, we read them as prophecies kind of.
Yeah,
we read them as statements on the 2,600 years between them and us.
Mm-hmm.
We read that about various Greek myths all the time. We're like, well, this happened in the 1600s in France, this happened here, and this happened in the Dark Ages. So that's something we have. Whereas modern books, not that the quality goes any worse at all, because it doesn't with modern writing. I think the ambition sometimes goes down. They're not really attempting to write about the 5 ages of man anymore.
Yeah.
But we don't have the chance to see how true they were.
Played out,
yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best way of saying it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about why we are doing Greek as well, or like really ancient myths.
Yeah.
And because there are more modern like religions that we could look at.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure if looking at these ones would make it seem like we're saying these are like the OGs. But I feel like when we were looking at when we were reading this, I was thinking a lot of the language from it really informs English translations of other ancient texts, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, just the language for talking about spirits and so on, I think is the same. So it's kind of, because it's not like we're saying, oh, every other story that's been written since then is just a rip-off of this story.
No.
It's just saying, I think the language is why we see the connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
So I think the big question is whether this is so we say, okay, haha, Hesiod thought he was in the Iron Age. Everyone always thinks they're in the Iron Age. Mm-hmm. That's a psychological human thing. Things right now are always as the worst they've ever been. The Golden Age was always somewhere in the past.
Yes.
I wanted to mention modern day, or somewhat modern day, images of the future and the past.
Yes.
Because right now, in fiction, in discourse, all over, in our own heads, our vision of the future is so incredibly bleak. Maybe as bleak as I won't say as bleak as it's ever been, but with climate change, no one really pictures a good future.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, because otherwise I think I'd crumble into depression, but...
Yeah.
And we wanted to mention, you mentioned the 50s, because that's probably the most famous example. There was such an optimism, nuclear energy was coming through,
Mm-hmm.
Relative peace.
Yeah.
Visions of the future was so
economic
imaginative.
Growth was...
Yeah, a big economic boom. Visions of the future was so imaginative,
mm-hmm.
and it was such a cool society they were picturing.
Just look at the World Fair. It was like... Yeah. Just these super future cars, yeah.
So what happened, and are they kind of... Because if we're saying that psychologically, humans have always thought of now as bleak and the future as bleak.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on there? I mean,
I don't know. It was. I feel like their most closest reference for what life could be like would be like the World Wars. So referentially to their parents' lives, they were like, we have it better.
So you think it was like a reaction to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like hard times making.
Yeah. No, I see.
Good or optimistic people. Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah, but then for maybe not us, but I feel like they look back on their parents and they're like, they had it so easy, 5 cents for a can of pop or whatever. It's like
things suck now. Student loans.
Yeah, so that's what they feel like. They're looking back. Their closest point of reference would be their parents or their grandparents.
Also, climate change.
And climate change is also an issue.
Considering one of the big goals of this podcast was to kind of spread more of an optimism about the future,
mm-hmm.
or let's say more of an ambition.
Yeah.
How can this story kind of inform that? Knowing... Well, here's something else I wanted to mention. So we were saying that the current image of the future is so negative.
Yes.
Because we just picture it as a straight downward line because of climate change, wars, mass migration, food, overpopulation, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to mention a short-lived anime from the 80s called Future Boy Conan.
Yeah.
Or maybe from the 70s, actually.
I don't know.
Future Boy Conan. It was made by Hayao Miyazaki before he joined Studio Ghibli. And he is a fierce kind of environmentalist, traditionalist, Japanese, and is very much opposed to modern Japan, and was very much misses old Japan all through his work.
Yeah.
And Future Boy Conan is no different. And not just in this show, but in a lot of his work, he has this image of, it's very idyllic.
Yes.
It's very back to the land.
Mm-hmm.
No big cities or anything. But the way we get there is through a terrible kind of near-apocalyptic event. So in Future Boy Conan, it's this huge wars and then these huge floods, which kind of, from that flood is born a new island where Conan, who's this little boy, can kind of live and have his adventures and stuff.
Yeah.
And also the big villain in that series is a big town, a big heavy emissions town.
It's called Irontown.
Yeah, it's called Irontown, yeah.
Yeah.
No, Irontown is in... Yeah, I think it's called Irontown.
Yeah.
It might be called Industria.
Oh, yeah, Irontown's in one of the other ones. But, like, Industria, Irontown, same difference.
He's basically our kind of spirit creator. I love him.
Yeah. So, I think what you're getting at that is does there have to be some kind of a catastrophe for things to change?
That's what he has kind of... Or maybe that's just the easiest way he thinks.
To warn people, say, let's maybe try and skip this.
Yeah.
And I feel like what we can get from this poem would be, what it's promoting, I think, is being virtuous and being
godly.
Grounded.
In the Greek times, it was godly. Today, it doesn't have to be godly. It can be mindful or whatever, whatever it is.
Yeah, but I think that's what it's promoting.
Thoughtful, virtuous.
Yes. Having your set of morals and really sticking to your guns, not just kind of going with the flow, because the flow can take you, or it can take society to causing climate change.
Well,
not questioning your actions.
Yeah, not even to climate change, but some terrible ethical places, as we saw all through the 20th century. That's something I like here when he talks about for the bad times, for the Iron Ages. Fathers won't get along with their kids, nor guests with their host, nor partner with partner, and brothers won't be friends the way they used to be. It's really like an ethical degeneracy, which, I mean, I'm so young, but I still find myself kind of being kind of repulsed by sometimes in society. When I see what's popular, when I see what's on TV, when I see what's in mass entertainment, and when I see the kind of movements which are, and the kind of behavior, I guess, which is being normalized. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like exploitation, just for one.
Yeah, all sorts of really kind of bad ethical practices, moral practices, which I really feel like even in prior times, this is not to romanticize prior times, because every time has had their own ethical issues.
Slavery, of course.
Mass inequalities, all these kind of things. But I mean on a person-to-person discourse level, or just now kind of repeated practices, which have always been the staple of society. I do see kind of the beginning of those things breaking down sometimes, and it feels like no one really thinks it's an issue. I don't see many people complaining about it. It's kind of like, oh, don't be so prudish or conservative or whatever it may be, you know what I mean?
Like, you mean if they were against, like, social media or something? Like, if you were saying, I think the internet's too big, or like, I think people don't talk like anymore.
That. No, I mean like ethical stuff.
Oh, okay.
I mean, like, I guess on the internet, I mean, it's the breakdown of discourse, very bad insults.
Yes.
I mean, people just being bad to each other.
Okay.
And kind of breaking down systems which have often been quite helpful.
Okay.
I mean, kind of a normalization of bad behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe we should get off that topic and potentially wrap it up today.
Cool.
We started this new series kind of talking about ancient wisdom, bringing it to the future, trying to interpret it. Our first sage we consulted was Hesiod. So thank you, sir, for being the first economist and a great Greek writer. I don't know.
Yeah. Shout out to Hesiod.
Like he's in the
Come
room.
on the podcast.
Yeah. So we might get Hesiod on next week. We'll keep you updated.
What are we talking about next week, Aaron?
Was it food?
No.
Oh no, sorry. Next week. We are talking about religion and ecology.
Yes, because I'm in the class called Religion and Ecology,
So
and
Alicia's going to be just reading off the syllabus.
yeah.
So it's a similar topic to this week, but more broad.
It's going to be a similar kind of series because we're not going to be able to hit every religion.
And more green.
More green, yeah.
The ultimate virtue, sustainability.
Yeah.
So on that note, have a great day, everyone.
Follow us on Instagram at @the_environmental for episode updates, inspiration, clips from podcasts and things.
Yeah, some scientific content, some educational content, some cool graphics and behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. And we have new episodes every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. See you next week.
Bye.